Welcome to Old Classic Car and another set of original photographs of British cars in the 1950s and the 1960s. And we begin actually with a car that just about predates the 1950s. This is a Hillman Minx Mark II. It's quite a rare drop-head coupe version. Outside 110 Old Park Ridings in Enfield in about 1948 or 49. And actually, if you look on Street View, the house in the background hasn't changed a great deal at all. Next up, another Roots Group product. Here we've got one STU, which is obviously a Singer Vogue. This registration is now on a 2015 Toyota, of all things, but I can imagine that the number plate pirates would love this one. Next up, we've got a head-on view of a Vauxhall E-Series 113 HMY. This is a Vauxhall Wyvern, London registered car from about 1956. This one actually still shows on DVLA, but untaxed since 1986. So is it still around, or has it been scrapped and DVLA not informed? And next up, we've got a cluster of cars on a little ferry. This is the Bodinick ferry down in Cornwall. We've got a Mark I Mini, an F-Type Victor, a Morris Traveller. I think that's a Mark II Consul behind, and there's a little Ford 100E Prefect bringing up the rear. Is that ferry still on operation, I wonder? And I also, as well as all the black and white photographs here, I have got a few in-period colour shots, including this Rover P6 here. This is a TC, it's a twin carburettor car from about 1967. There's an A60 on the left and a Triumph 2000 on the right. Two now, head-on view. We've got a Ford Prefect on the left, 382 JFM, that's a Chester series. On the right, a Singer Gazelle TMB, which is a Cheshire series. I'm not quite sure of the location of this particular photo. There's a Farina on the far left, and on the right, probably a Minx convertible. The mighty RAF Blackburn Beverley is joined by a Series 2 Land Rover. Looks like an RAF Land Rover. There's a number just on the rear tailgate. So clearly this was at some open day at an airfield somewhere, probably back in the 1960s, I would have thought. Continuing with these classic British car photos, I've got 45 SFM, that's a Cheshire registered, circa 1960 Ford Anglia 105E. Could be one of the posher ones, as it's got a two-tone paint scheme. Very much a Suburban setting there. Great little car. RAC badge on the front of this one. And to the Rally Monte Carlo in 1955, and we've got SUM7, which is a Mark 7 Jaguar. I think that's Mr. and Mrs. Appleyard on board. You can see the screen demisters there. There's a gentleman from the press on the right hand side. Would appear to be a wedding somewhere or other. In the foreground we've got a Standard 8 with a period sun visor, a little 100E Anglia a bit further back, and further along on the right we've got a Mark I Cortina, possibly a little Standard, Flying Standard, and then an F-Type Victor behind that, and various other vehicles going further away. 9821 KD, that's a Liverpool circa 1962 registered Minx. I think it's a Series 3B or a 3C. Got a 100E Escort on the right, and a PA Vauxhall, a Velox or a Cresta. There's a Standard 8 or 10 just on the left, a couple of kids on bicycles. And a few minutes later, there's that Minx in the background. We've got a Mark II Consul here. That's a Staffordshire registration from March 1960. We've got a side view of that PA Cresta or Velox there, and you can see the little 100E Escort estate. Just slightly further afield, we've got a Mark II Ford Zephyr next, with an A for Austria badge on the back. And in the background, is that a Fiat 600 or one of the licence-built cars from other factories, perhaps a Seat or something similar to that. Back to Hillman's, and the young lad clambering out of the back of the family's Series 3 Minx. In the background, we've got a two-tone Herald, possibly exhibiting a little bit of tuck under on the rear wheels there, or it might just be the photograph, and there's an Anglia alongside that. BGJ 849B is a 1964 MGB Roadster. This car is still showing as taxed and on the road. Quite unusual being black. It appears to have an aftermarket hardtop on here, but where's that car now? Someone's got it and someone's still using it. But this photo was back in the 1960s outside the Gloucester Arms. Lovely little shot now of a Mark I Austin Mini. looks like a deluxe with the overriders and the wheel trims, possibly the rear opening side windows as well, a feature of the deluxes as well. Original period roof rack on this one. You can see a Moggy Minor split screen, Series 2 in the background as well. Now we're down to Cheddar Gorge, WMC 728. That's a Ford Prefect, that's a London series from 1950. Not quite sure what the other cars are further away, but it's definitely Cheddar Gorge. A little sign on the left saying no waiting, polite notice. Staying in Cheddar Gorge, we've got another scene here a bit further up in a small car park. I think that's a pre-war Morris just facing our way, and there's a little 500 weight Fordson van just pulling up. I can just about see a black standard 8 or a 10, I think. Here's an unusual photo of a left-hand drive Morris Minor 1000. In the back window it says Morris Minor 1000. There's more, makes more of your petrol. That registration number is from Tripoli in Libya. Someone confirmed that for me many years ago. This photo, like many of these, are in the image archive section on the main Old Classic Car website, as is this photo of a very early Morris Minor MM Tourer. Great little car, this one. Does anyone recognise where that registration is from? Possibly Sri Lanka. But if you know any details, please pop a note in the comments. Same with all these photos. If you can shed light on any of the cars shown, that would be great. I thought I'd include a lorry here. We've got a wimpy construction Ford Thames lorry of the mid-1950s. Now this could be the 4D, which had the diesel engine, or the ET6, which had the petrol engine. They both look pretty much identical from this angle. Next up, another Austin. Here we've got an Austin A55 Cambridge, a Mark II Cambridge with the big fins. Outside a little bungalow somewhere. I'm not quite sure when this photo dates to. I think it was about 1964 from memory. FT7263, that's a Tynemouth registered Vauxhall L-Type. It's probably a Velox or a Wyvern, I'm not quite sure which. An old bungalow in the background. Next old photograph, that is Arundel Castle in the background, and the date is 1949. The van nearest the camera is a Comma Q25. There's a little Ford E83W further away. I'm not quite sure what the grand car with the wheel on the running board is in the immediate foreground, but if you can identify that, please let me know. Here's a Swish machine. This is an Armstrong Siddeley Hurricane. This was one of several photos that turned up of a family's tour around Europe. This is in Nancy, in northeastern France. Perhaps they popped in for some cigars in that shop there, in the Tabac, or the Café du Commerce. Maybe they're in there, but either way, one wonderful car. Back to the photographs taken in the northwest of England. 242 FNM, that's a Vauxhall Victor FB. That's a Bedfordshire series introduced in November of '61. We've got another early-ish Minx in the background, one of the Audax range, and I think behind that we've got an Austin or a Morris LD van. Back to another car ferry, and here we've got 6881YG. This is an early A35 van. The painted grille shows that it's an A35, and the lack of front flashing indicators show that this was an early A35 van, still with the pop-up semaphore indicators. There's a Moggy Minor behind that. Another colour photo now, talking Morris Minors. There's one over on the left there from 1967. In the centre we've got 756 SFK, a Worcester registered Rover P4. Circa 1957 or early 58, and there's a Hillman Super Minx over to the right with Notec blue spot lamp there, and AA and RAC badges. And we're back to Cheddar Gorge again. Quite a variety of classic British cars in evidence here. We've got an A40 or A50 Cambridge just driving in or out, PXJ324. We've got A30 on the left there, 100E, an Armstrong Siddeley, Anglia, there's a little 300E van there, many more. Humber Scepter is next, 999YLG. I've got a feeling someone was photographing cars in the early 1960s, about 1963, that had interesting registration numbers, and this Humber Scepter was definitely one of them. There's a Comma Cob next to it with added windows, could be a Husky. First of two photos that are going to feature in this particular collection now of this Phase 1 Standard Vanguard somewhere in France, outside the local gendarmerie or police station. Got a nice roof rack on that one. Carry on with this old standard. Now it is shown somewhere on the coast. I'm assuming this is in Nice or somewhere around there. Carrying on with these old black and white photos of British cars, we have a slightly bent Morris Cowley, possibly in Oxford, MOU 576. I won't try and pronounce the name of the place, but this was in Spain somewhere. Clearly it's had a bit of an impact, and sadly I doubt those cross-ply tyres ever touched British roads again. I imagine it just got scrapped and the family made their own way back. 952 UVT. Obviously this is a Jaguar Mark II. It could be a 2.4, 3.4 or 3.8. Not quite sure what. That's a Stoke registration. There's a Bedford CA van behind that. That's a Mark II with the shallow windscreen. The Mark III had the much deeper one-piece windscreen. Young lady here being photographed, but of real interest is that car in the background. That's an Austin A70 Hampshire that appears to have been converted into a Woody, but has had accident damage on the driver's side rear if you look closely. It all looks like it's been a bit patched up. The Rover, this is RBP 175, that's a West Sussex registered Rover from about 1954. You can tell it's a fairly early one because the rear end tapers down, but it's not the very early P4 because they had the extra Cyclops style lamp on the front. So this one's a little later than that. It's obviously a two-tone car. A Zephyr 6, that's a Mark III Ford Zephyr 2606 FM. There's a little Wolseley 1500 in the background, and there's a minivan over to the left there. I'm not quite sure where all these photographs were taken. RAC and AA badge, so he's obviously hedging his bets there. Now we've got a colour photo from 1969 of a maroon, I'm not sure if that's a factory colour, maroon or possibly brown Austin A40 Devon. That's a Hampshire behind it, quite a rare Austin A70 Hampshire. There's a Mark I Cortina as well, a Mark II Cortina Estate over on the left. There's a very swish looking car. This is a Sunbeam Talbot 90 Mark III. Full marks for the design of that particular garage. Quite a nice house in the background as well, very swanky, but the garage is really quite something to behold. .686XFM, we've got a Sunbeam Alpine here, a smart car of the early 1960s. In the background is a four-door, what looks to be an MG 1100. The ADO 16 type twin carburetors, a sporty version if you like of the Austin and the Morris 1100. Over to Kenya now. This is Nairobi. Someone once contacted me via the main website and told me that this is Nairobi. We've got a rally prepared Ford 105E, lots of extra lamps and a repositioned fuel filler on the rear wing there. Who was driving that one? KHL 489. If you know, please pop a note in the comment section. SUV 613, that's a Ford 100E. It's a Prefect. You can see the four doors down the side there. That's a London 1956 registration series, but does anyone recognise this Manor House Inn? To a camping scene now. I'm not quite sure where this was or where that particular Ford Consul Mark I was registered. Does anyone recognise that registration number? There's some derelict looking buildings in the background. There's a motorcycle as well, and over on the far left there's a glimpse of a little Fiat Topolino. Back to BMC, we've got KJC 692. That's a Welsh registered Austin A60 Cambridge. This had the 1622 B series engine under its bonnet. The one before had the 1489 cc engine. Staying with big BMC Farinas, we've got another one here. The lack of extra little strip on the sill tells me that this is an Austin Cambridge rather than a Morris Oxford. The location is the Welsh town with a very long name, Llanfair and that in the background is the War Memorial with a clock on it. There's a great little picture here from the late 1950s of a Hilmer Minx boarding a Silver City Bristol freighter. This regularly operated to service flying cars and their occupants over to France, usually operating out of Lydd down in Kent. There's a whole page of photographs like that on the main Old Classic Car website. Here we have a Humber Super Snipe 6763K. That's a Liverpool series from April 1960 onwards. Interesting badges on the front for the ADAC, which was a German automobile association, a bit like the RAC or the AA, the German equivalent. There's two badges in fact. Now we've got a street scene. I'm not quite sure where this is, but we've got a Minx on the right, a Mark I Morris Mini Minor, Vauxhall, got a Bedford CA, that's the Mark III type with a deep one-piece windscreen. There's a Triumph 2000 Mark I on the left, various other cars, a little Bedford HA van and a pop. Next up, a Leafy Hotel, I believe this was, and the car is a Morris 6. This was based on the Morris Oxford MO, but with a longer front end and a 6-cylinder engine, but the main body shell, the main bit that you can see there, is from the Oxford MO of the early 1950s. Side-on view here of an Austin A40 Mark I. These were introduced in 1958. This was all over one colour. Usually they had a different colour roof, but by special order you could have all over the same colour. And I'm guessing that's probably Farina Grey, and there's a light coloured 105E Anglia alongside it. Little Ford pop next, with a lady sat behind the wheel. Very shiny AA badge on this particular one. The car looks in very nice condition, so I'm guessing it's not too old, and there's a black example of the same alongside it. If you like these old photographs like this, please let me know and I'll see if I can dig out some more. Head-on view now of a Morris 1100 registration 6LG. I wonder where that registration started out. That reg is now on a 2022, i.e. brand new Porsche of some description. But back in the early 1960s, it was on this Morris 1100. Two little gems now on a suburban street, quite a smart street by the look of it. We've got a 1964 Vauxhall Viva HA, and behind that a Wolseley 1500. Three little gems here. We've got an Austin A55 Cambridge in the foreground, which appears to be on wedding car duties. Behind that, an Austin minivan with a little vent in the roof. And behind that, we have a Morris Minor. Another colour shot from 1969. This is a wonderful Daimler Majestic Major, the 4.5 litre V8. In the background is H.A. Saunders Garage of Worcester. In the 1970s this was called Austin House. The building was completed in 1939 and is now set to be used by the University of Warwick, or even Worcester. Here we have JCO 121. This is a very early Austin A30. This is the AS3 type of A30. Lots of little detail differences. The main one from this angle is the fuel filler is on the rear wing as opposed to on the rear panel near the number plate. The speedometer is also circular rather than the usual shape on those cars. Next up, LWK 343. That's a 1951 Jaguar Mark 7, used for the Monte Carlo Rally, and also did a bit of circuit racing in the hands of people such as Mike Hawthorne and etc, etc. Clearly in a garage scene here, we've got an SO sign and so on. Daimler Conquest is next with what appears to be an Austin or a Morris 1800 alongside it. This is late 1960s scene. Still quite a few classic car photos to go. This rarity, or certainly rare now, is a Vauxhall Victor FB Estate. Very smart car, very clean, probably quite new at the time, 965 GYL. Holidaying scene here in a caravan. Does anyone recognise the caravan? The car itself is quite a rare, actually, Singer Gazelle Estate. I can't imagine there are too many of those around, even in the 1960s, and now there are very, very few. I'm not even sure if I've ever seen one. If you have any old black and white photos like this and you're able to do some high-res scans and email them over to include in a future video, that'd be fantastic. Here we've got an A40 or an A50, and despite the appearance of that number plate, I think this is somewhere out in Empire. I don't think this is in this country. Like I was saying, if you have any old photos that you're able to scan and email them over, my details are on the main old classic car website, the email address and so on. That would be fantastic. HAA 101, this is a Bentley Mark 6 of about 1950 or thereabouts. I do like the tractor in the background. To the left is a Morris Oxford. You can see the little strip on the sill that I was talking about earlier on. And to the right, a Mark II Austin A40. Two photos now of Sidmouth. Now we've got a couple of Morris vans, I believe, on the left. And on the right, it's a comma in the livery of British Railways. Here we move to the seaside, also in Sidmouth. We've got an Austin A40 Somerset driving away. Lots of people here, well wrapped up, admiring the view. Black and white photo now of AJK 199. This is a fairly early Wolseley 1500. These were based more or less on the floor pan of the Morris Minor, but they had the B series engine 1489cc under their bonnet. The Wolseley had single carb, the Riley 1.5 version had a twin carb, it was a bit sportier. Here we've got a side view of a very smart 103E Ford Pop. It's been modified slightly with the white wheels and the shiny headlights. Normally it would have been painted body colour, a couple of extra lamps on the front as well. Snazzy roof rack, probably by Evershaw. Extra little indicators on the sides, just behind the doors. Another camping scene here, and we've got TMJ 447, I think. That's a comma cob van. Over on the right is a little Thames 400E, the little flat-fronted forerunner of the Ford Transit. Here is another holidaying scene, I imagine. This is Burnham-on-Sea in 1959. We've got a Ford Consul Mark 1 on the left, early Land Rover alongside that, Series 1. Then we've got a Ford Anglia, the sit-up and beg Anglia. Then I'm not quite sure what the other car is facing away. Then another Land Rover, an A35 and various others. And here is the final photo. This is an A83W that Dad and his mates used to collect G-EBZM, an Avro Avian, from an old school cellar in the early 1960s. The little van somehow survived the job, but I'm sure the roof was never quite the same after having that fuselage on the top of it. And that rounds out this collection of classic British cars as seen in the 1950s and 1960s. I hope you found that of interest. There are quite a few videos like this on the channel now, and I do plan to add some more, so if you like this kind of thing, please give the video a like and if possible subscribe to the channel, and there'll be more videos along very, very soon. So thanks for watching, bye for now.